Tonight, we're here in the first of 3 educational sessions that are going to be put on by the CCRC, the Clinton Charter Reform Coalition. That is different than the Charter Commission. The Charter Commission ended on 6/20 when the final copy was put into the Board of Selectmen. Okay? Lynn and I are not a part of that coalition. We are part of the Charter Commission. So we're just here to kick off what the Charter Commission would have done if it was approved by the Board of Selectmen. So this went a different route. We're not here to rehash that. We're not here to talk about that. We're not here to talk about effective dates. We're not here to talk about anything that's been politicized here tonight. We're here to learn about the town manager position, the town planner position, and how they interact with the town council in this case, and the mayor of North Branford. North Branford was chosen because that is, a lot of people say that we're pretty close to North Branford, same dirt, we're the same size. Actually, a lot of the charter for the town manager might have been taken or looked at from North Branford and Ellington. So it's very representative of our town. So we just wanted to get, that's the ground rules tonight. We just want to get an education out there of what the 2 positions are, how they interact with the board, similar to what would happen here, Board of Selectmen, how the legislative body reacts to a person, and people actually doing the work on the ground. So we're going to hear, they're going to start out with a little bit of this is what I do, my daily stuff. They're going to tell you what a town planner versus town manager is. I think that needs to be stated, and their interactions with the town. So there are note cards. If you need to ask a question, we will also at the end walk around with mics so you can ask questions there. And I think the questions will also be posted up on the CCR website and linked with the video tonight. So even though there's only 25 of you here tonight, we're hoping that this is going to be seen by more than that. And the discussions on Facebook will be proactive and ask questions. So I'm now going to turn it over to Lynn, and she's going to make the introductions. Thank you for coming.
Good evening. It's so good to see you here today, and I just want to let you know that this is the first of 3 meetings that we have planned to really educate the people about what the role of town managers are in both positive ways and maybe from a town that went back to a Board of Selectmen. We want you to we promised when we did the petition drive that we would use the fall to have an educational opportunity for people so that they could be as well-informed as possible, and then make a great vote when it was time to vote on the charter revision. So I'm so glad you're here tonight. If you talk to neighbors and friends who weren't here, as Art said, lead them to the website, and we have it taped tonight, and so people will be able to look at the events tonight in their own home. We are so happy to have representatives from the town of North Branford join us tonight. On the left, we have Carey Duques, who is the town planner for the town of North Branford. She's been on board since 2014, and she will be able to talk to you about what her role is and how she works not only with the planning and zoning department in her town, but with the the board, the town manager, and the mayor, town council. On the right, we have Mike Paulhus, who's been the town manager in North Branford since 2013. He's come to that position through a route that's quite exciting, and he will be able to tell us about what his life has been like as both a first selectman and as a town manager. And we welcome them here tonight, and thank you so much.
I hope this is working all right. Great. Well, thank you for having us this evening. I guess I've been charged with going first, and I will just kind of give you a brief history. I started my career in public service local government in 1994 in the town of Windham. I was about halfway through my MPA at UConn when a position opened up as an administrator working under the first selectman. So I was appointed to that position and finished up, got my MPA from UConn, and 7 years later, having worked for 2 different first selectmen, the latter had left and left the seat open, and I went for it and got elected as first selectman. The only reason really is the fact there was no chance there was a charter revision commission even forming and no chance that they were going to change the form of government there. After 7 years of on-the-job training and a master's in public administration, I was really helping the first selectman run the town. And so I felt confident I could do the position, and I could be both, in this case in Wyndham, the chief elected official and the chief executive officer. So I threw my hat in the ring, I won, and I did 3 terms as first selectman in the town of Wyndham. And I bring that perspective, having lived that life of a dual role as first selectman and the chief executive officer. It's a difficult task to do and run both on a daily basis. So I fast forward a few years. I lost in 2007, and as it turns out, during my tenure, a Charter Revision Commission was formed, and I lost, and the person who won came in with a limited 2-year term because they were changing the form of government to a town manager. So I was out. I went into private sector and was a financial advisor, and then a position opened up in North Branford, and that's when I came back to local government in 2014. And so I can tell you that there's a world of difference in terms of trying to do or function, getting elected every 2 years, and looking and trying to do long-term planning as like a town manager in that situation. So coming to North Branford, there really is this separation that I call it, and just between the council and the manager. So in North Branford, there's a 9-member council and a mayor who, whoever gets the most votes gets the designation of mayor, and there's a deputy mayor, the 2 highest vote getters. But essentially, they handle policy, and the mayor handles the ceremonial stuff. So I think it's a perfect fit and a sort of a tag team duo, if you will, where I get to do the implementation of policy on a daily basis and get to run in terms of talking about running the town and working with department heads and setting goals and helping assist with policy development, but the council handles all of those decisions. I work with the mayor in crafting the agenda, and we happen to meet the 1st and 3rd Tuesdays of every month, except for the summer months where we go into a summer schedule meeting once a month. But I work with the mayor in crafting the agenda and putting that together. And essentially, it's something I do, and with his consultation and his review, he signs off, says he's ready to go because he's got to run the meetings. And that's what we've set up and the way we run it. And I like the fact that, if those calls come, calls from residents, I take on a daily basis, but the political stuff, the mayor steps in and takes care of that. So I really don't have to worry about any of the political stuff. And I've always had an arm's length, and we've had this understanding that I'm not going there. I'm not going into the political realm. So when we have appointments that come up on a regular basis, we have a process where each party, the 2 major parties, the Republicans and the Democrats, will have their process. So if there's somebody that needs to be, elected to a P&Z, if it's an RRD, then it'll go through the various committees, they'll go through the vetting process. I don't put anything on the agenda until they bring it forward and let me know that they've got a person they want to serve, so I don't get involved in that process. So it keeps me out of that realm where I can focus exclusively on managing the town on a day-to-day basis. So in that sense, I think the goal there, and it's just the continuity, if you will, and through transitions every 2 years getting elected, the council changes over somewhat, but by and large, there's not too much change. So I think of the town manager as that steady fixture that working through with the institutional history, memory of where we're going, what we're trying to do, what we're trying to accomplish, and just trying to steer the boat and keep us going in the right direction. So I think there's, goals in terms of longevity, in terms of, the turnover with the council through elections and, through budgets, through capital projects, long-term planning issues that we have to do. And I just, having lived it, I know that I think, I may be unbiased, I guess, I have to admit, the town manager form of government, I think, works really well. And because the mayor will get to do the economic development stuff, and he'll do the ribbon cuttings and the handshaking and the networking and all of that stuff, and really keeps the administrative day-to-day stuff to me. And as our charter says, it's set up that way so that the council won't have an influence on department heads like Carey and all the department heads under North Branford answer to the town manager, they answer to me. So if a council member has a question, fine. Informational point, they'll call Carey, they'll call the engineer, they'll call the public works director, informational purpose, hey, what's going on? But cannot direct those members. That's my job. And so we keep that out, the hiring, I'm not pressured in terms of any way to hire a cousin, a family member, a friend. So we follow a strict process for that. And not that it's ever happened, but I think they all know. I will say the form of government in North Branford with the council manager has been in effect since 1971. I haven't said that already. So this council and this town is very accustomed to how the process works, and so it, I think, works well. A manager like myself, in most cases, towns are looking for someone with a master's in public administration or maybe possibly a business administration and municipal experience. So that's what I brought to the table when I came to North Branford. There's certain training and certifications you can get beyond that. I had a lot to do with economic development when I was in Wyndham. We did not have an economic development coordinator, so that was left to me. So I developed a skill set there that was helpful in bringing to North Branford because they don't have one either. Finance and getting into the private sector in terms of being a financial advisor, that helped. There's a number of different skill sets that through an MPA program and experience in municipal government that a town manager can step in and hit the ground running. Of course, there's certainly a learning curve with respect to any given town and finding out who the players are, but I think it just works well because you have this insulation, and the council can handle the politics, even the special interest. Developers coming and trying to, get around and talk to the mayor or talk to the council. That it's a dead end when it comes to my position or my office with respect to anything that's going to deviate from our process. So don't get me wrong, we're pro-business, if you will, pro-development. We want smart development, we want smart growth. And there's a way to do it, and there's a right way to do it, and we're going to do that. So we'll meet with developers, and we do on a regular basis, and Carey can get into that and tell you about that. I think we've done a great job building a team that will answer to them, but it's not going to be driven by politics, and it's not going to be driven by special interest or campaign contributions or anything of that nature. So I think it happens to work well. And I don't want to monopolize, and I'm just going to try and get through a few more because I'm hoping you'll have questions you'll want answered. I just wrote down a couple of differences that you see from town to town that use the council town manager form of government. In the first case, in terms of the actual appointment of a town manager, for me, I'm an at-will employee, so at any point, I don't have a contract per se. It's an at-will where the council could, at any meeting, by a vote majority, in this case our charter, 2/3 vote, could remove the town manager. Other managers have contractual 3 to 4 years that they get reviewed and renew the contract. So every town's a little bit different. The charter depends on how you set it up, and I'm not sure, I didn't read through all of your particulars, but there's some differences. Department heads, I appoint all of the department heads, but need confirmation from the council. So in theory, I could bring a name forward and the council could say no, and if we're having arguments and so forth, I could keep bringing names forward until they agree, but they have the final say. But we've got a pretty good working relationship where they rely on me to go through the vetting process and bring who I think is the best candidate. And one of the earliest ones, of course, was Carey, and obviously I think has been a great choice for the town of North Branford. Other towns don't have the confirmation process, and it's just the town manager has full authority to hire and fire. There are differences you'll see, I'm sure you have, when you look at different charters from around the state, but I think we happen to have a process that works really well. We try to promote, obviously, the whole high ethical standards and ethical conduct, and try to work through transparency and being transparent as possible. So I'm not in a position to play the political game. So there's no, nothing going on with the agenda and the appointments of people. We're just trying to stick to the business at hand, which is incredibly difficult in this climate in Connecticut, as you all know, with our current budget situation, which is a cloud hanging over all of our heads throughout the state. We've got enough on our plate. I think it happens to work really well when I get the team with the mayor and allow him to handle certain functions, and I do the day-to-day management and help and assist and carry out their policy. So I think I'll stop there, I'll pause there and turn it over to Carey, but maybe set up the fact that all the department heads answer to me, including Carey, but we have, the way we've structured North Branford, we've got a sort of a cluster, if you will, within Town Hall that puts the building, engineering, planning, zoning all together in the same location. So, and my office is just down the hall. So, again, back to economic development or any of the applications that come through on a daily, weekly basis, we're able there to get together and collaborate on a daily basis. So, with that, obviously a big portion of that component is planning, and with that, I'll turn it over to Carey.
Good evening. Again, my name is Carey Duques, and I am the town planner for North Branford. I wanted to take a minute and talk with you just briefly about the history of planning and zoning in North Branford, a little bit about my background, and then talk about some of the projects that I've been focusing on over the past 3 years that I've been working for the town. So the town adopted zoning pretty early in the process, back in 1962, and the town has had a planner since the 70s. Right now, the town planner position is full-time. When I was hired 3 years ago, actually the position was for town planner, but the council asked that I also consider being the zoning officer, which of course I said, yes, I could do that, but I felt like there was a little bit of a conflict because as a zoning officer, I would be responsible for doing enforcement, and as the town planner, I felt like that was more encouraging development and economic encouragement and development throughout the town. So luckily, funding enabled the town to hire a part-time zoning officer, which we have now, and we've had him since about 2015. And he is part-time, so he works 19 hours a week, and that's been a huge help, and I'll get into why in a few minutes. I've been working for the town, as I said, for the past 3 years. Prior to that, I worked in Massachusetts for 2 municipalities up there doing planning for both communities. One was the city of Medford, and the other was the city of Salem. And I have my undergraduate degree in environmental studies and political science, and a master's in urban environmental policy and planning. In 2008, I received my accreditation for certification in planning, which is from the American Institute of Certified Planners. And just last November, I also became a certified zoning enforcement officer. So because our zoning officer is only part-time, I do review some zoning permits and do enforcement when he's not around. But I primarily leave the enforcement up to our zoning officer so that I can focus on planning projects. In North Branford, as the town planner, I also staff wetlands. So I staff wetlands, which meets once a month, and then the Planning and Zoning Commission meets 2 times a month. And recently I've implemented that our second meeting of the month, we have a planning item on the agenda. So I'm trying to encourage our Planning and Zoning Commission to think about not just zoning and reacting to applications, but instead think about planning for the town, and also our plan of conservation and development, which I'll mention in a little bit. So my main responsibility as town planner, I would say, is to staff the Planning and Zoning Commission. So we have all types of applications that come in. You may be familiar with some of them: site plan review, special use permit, subdivisions, and also some occasional text amendments where we're actually looking to change our zoning regulations. Most times it's at the request of someone to help them hopefully enhance economic development in the town. So I review all of those applications. I provide comments to the Planning and Zoning Commission. And as Mike mentioned, I actually gather a lot of the department heads together for larger applications prior to having the application go to the Planning and Zoning Commission, so that the department heads have the opportunity to comment on the application, review all of the details, and kind of work through the kinks so that we can expedite the process as much as possible, because we are very business friendly and we're trying to promote and encourage development throughout town in a smart manner and in compliance with our zoning regulations. I also inform the Planning and Zoning Commission of new legislation. So one example of that is that this past July, the legislature passed legislation talking about farm breweries. So North Branford, being a very agricultural community, has a farmer who's actually growing hops currently on his property, and he was interested in having this farm brewery regulation applied to him so that he could not only grow the hops, but actually create, ferment the beer, make the beer, but then also have a brewery on site for tasting and selling of beers. So currently our zoning regulations do not allow that, but because he has interest in it, and again, trying to promote existing business and agriculture in the town, the Planning and Zoning Commission is working with him to try and enhance that and support his endeavors. Let's see, I actively work with the Economic Development Commission on business retention, expansion, and education. Last spring, we worked on this farm trail map that shows existing farm stands and different community-supported agriculture locations. We actually have a vineyard in town with another one being built. So this map had been done in prior years, but it hadn't been updated in about 5 years. So I was able to work with the EDC on this. And again, because I wasn't out there doing zoning enforcement, I was able to focus some time on doing some planning and economic development for the town. So I helped spearhead that project and then just get the word out throughout town by putting those at local B&Bs, AAA, and then doing press releases. I'm also working with the EDC on some just easy things like updating the town's website. Another project is having some entrance signs into town. And it seems easy, but that kind of project, Welcome to North Branford sign, takes a lot of coordination. So working with the Department of Transportation to make sure that the signs are located at the appropriate location, that the state is okay with it, or that we've coordinated with adjacent property owners. And then, of course, working with Mike and the town council to make sure that the signs have the appropriate logo or colors, which we still haven't gotten to that point yet, but eventually we will. Another big project that Mike and I worked on with the town assessor is a program called the Assessment Deferral Program. And that is a program that is eligible for any business in town that is looking to expand onto their existing business, or if they're looking to build new. The one requirement is that they have to have an increased assessment of at least 35%. So once they meet that 35%, then they will qualify. And what it enables them to do is they can defer their increased tax amount for 5 years. So after they complete their new construction, they'll just pay their original tax amount. The first year after that, they'll pay their original tax amount plus 20% of the increased cost. Then the next year they'll go up to 40 and so on until they get to that 100%. So it enables businesses to expand, improve their business, and again, we're trying to keep businesses in town and support their development, but not make them go broke. So by doing this, we've been able to have them spread their costs over 5 years.
Yeah, and I just want to jump in on the process side. So you're probably thinking, well, what is, the whole program, how does it come about? Well, the research and looking at it, Carey and I sit down and look at this with the assessor and other staff, and I presented to the council. I have a standing item on my agenda that is called Town Manager's Report. What I typically do in that process is to give the council a heads up and say, listen, I have a presentation to make, or I have some information. In this case, Carey comes forward at the council meeting with the town assessor, and we're talking about explaining and making a presentation to them, and not an action item, more a presentation of the council, sort of like softening up the beachhead, if you will, and giving them a heads up that this is something we'd like to do. We're testing it out here. Is this a go or no go? And from there, it came back and we developed it. It was a tool for economic development. The council thought it was going to be helpful, and we began to flesh it out, so to speak, and get that done. So, really, it's driven by the council in terms of a policy and say, are we going to do this or not do this? And I typically like to give them a heads up and informational first, just like many other things, but that's how that came about, and it was very successful. We've had 3 through the program already, and I'm sure we'll definitely do more.
Another project that we've just started is called the First Impressions Program, and that's something that's run by Yukon and Connecticut Main Streets. So I found out about this program through this planner's listserv that I'm a part of, and what it is it's a program where 2 towns are partnered together, and so we've actually been partnered with Coventry, and we go and visit their community. They have a team of people that come and visit North Branford. But while we're there, we're kind of like secret shoppers. So we don't know when they're coming to North Branford. They don't know when we're going there. And we just collect observations. So again, it's first impressions. What do you see when you come into town? What are things that you like? What are areas where you feel like there could be some improvement? And then at the end of this whole process, each town will receive a report with recommendations and suggestions. So we've become involved in this, again, because we're updating our plan of conservation and development within the next year and a half. So I thought we could incorporate a lot of those suggestions into that. And I guess one other thing that I just want to mention is that as town planner, I feel like my role is also to foster relationships outside of just, other departments. So of course I work well with the building official, engineer, police, fire, etc. But I also work very closely with the North Branford Land Conservation Trust. And so by having an open dialogue with them, thinking about the bigger picture for the town of open space, I feel like we've had a great relationship, and they've become more active within the past, say, 5 to 8 years. And an example of that is that there's a 12-lot subdivision that's before the Planning and Zoning Commission right now. Actually, sorry, they're before wetlands right now. They'll come to Planning and Zoning next. But because I staff wetlands and I'm aware of their whole process, I've said to them up front that when they create their open space, I really want to make sure that the area along the Farm River, which is where this subdivision is being proposed, that remain open so that the public can have access. And so I've already started those dialogues between the developer and the land trust so that they can try and work out all the kinks. And then again, with the sole intention of having that be open space that's available to the public, to the residents of North Branford. And I guess I'll just end by mentioning the Plan of Conservation and Development. That is a very important plan for the town. It's updated every 10 years and required by statute. But I think I mentioned it last because although it is such a big document, it's not something that is done very often, obviously. So it's more these day-to-day projects of working with different department heads, working with the town manager, and working with groups like the Land Trust and each applicant that comes forward. I feel like those are my main responsibilities as town planner. So I guess we'll open it up for questions at this point.
Does anyone have questions? I can pass the mic to you. You can write them down. You can stand up and project your voice, whatever. Yes. Yes. For the video, yeah, just so your voice is.
Yeah, for the town planner, I'd like to know if the plan of conservation and development in North Branford has any teeth. It doesn't seem to have any here, and some people would charge it gets ignored if it's inconvenient in some way. I don't want to go any further than that. Does this have any teeth, or are you rewriting regulations that support the POCD? Thank you.
So I think that it does have teeth. I think that the heart of the plan of conservation and development, in my opinion, is it's called the action agenda in our plan. So it's a chart at the end of the plan of conservation and development that outlines goals and objectives for the town, states specific actions that have been developed as part of the process. And then it typically identifies who would actually take on those actions. So it might be the Planning and Zoning Commission, it might be the Land Trust. And I can say that since I've been there, I've definitely referred to it because I want to make sure that when we're moving forward and we're making text amendments, for example, to our zoning regulations, we're doing so to be in correspondence with our plan of conservation and development. One of the takeaways from our plan of conservation and development is that they identified in 2009 that there needs to be more housing for age-restricted housing. So we've actually been doing that. So we have, in the past 2 years, we created an overlay zone for age-restricted housing that's more cluster-like. So that fulfilled that's just one example of a project that fulfilled that. So I think that it does have teeth when you look at each of the individual action items within your plan, because it can come back to the Planning and Zoning Commission to have text amendments that then have real impact on the ground with development.
Any other questions? It's a chance. What do you really, oh yes. What do you really want to know?
My question is for the town manager. How long a process was it during which you were hired, and who was it who actually hired you?
Question. The council took it upon themselves to do it in-house rather than hire a consulting firm. And for full disclosure, I will have to tell you that there's a little gap that I failed to mention. After I lost the election in 2007, I had a call from another town manager from Coventry, I think it was, and said that they're looking for somebody in North Branford. So I actually filled in, was their interim in 2007 to just for about 4 or 5 months. And I will tell you that because part of your charter vision is probably going to talk about a residency requirement for the town manager position. So in North Branford at the time, there was a clear residency requirement. So I wasn't in the running to go from interim to permanent town manager. I was just there until they found one. And at that time, they did the same thing. The council chose to run the process and working through the mayor, and the mayor did that process. So when I came back, it was pretty quick in 07. But fast forward to 2013, it took a while. It took about 6 months. They were going through that process. I came actually late to the process. I think they were already into it, but it was entirely in-house by the council. Since then, or at that time, and this is sort of the reason why I came back or found myself coming back to North Branford, they did a charter revision, and among one of the many changes, they gave the residency issue to the authority of the council to decide. So when I came back to interview, it was a decision that they would hire me knowing that I was not going to be a resident and I'd commute and continue to commute from Willimantic. So that was a power invested in the council after charter revision. So it opened the door for me to come back, but it's always been done by the council through the mayor.
Hi, Clinton has a lot of empty businesses in town. How does your structure, manager, planner, is it more advantageous to filling those structures as opposed to the current selectman type of structure?
I happen to think so because I think of it as a the mayor and acting as that cheerleader, person that works with us in terms of economic development. I would say that the previous mayor was a lot more hands-on and did a lot of that, and that's why I think the model works well. It's just sort of duplicating myself, so to speak, and with the mayor, and then Carey and our staff. I think it works well. I mean, we don't have the luxury of having an interstate, a 95 or a 91 or a Route 1 or a coast. It's very difficult for us. So we're out there trying to put together, we're looking at every tool we can possibly use. And, the first impression is going to be another one, and trying to get the Economic Development Commission has been a great engine for us because of the enthusiasm with the current members. They've done a tremendous amount of work in the last 2 to 3 years. They've been very energized and they help us, but they're all volunteer. But it's a great help. And we're doing things like the brochure, we're doing the first impressions, and we're doing the assessment deferral. So we're trying to do everything we can, and it's a tough proposition for any town. But I think it works well for us, and I think we'll see the benefits down the road.
I think it works well once the business comes to town and comes to the counter at the building department to say, I'm interested in coming to town, do you have space for me? But where I've seen some struggles is just finding, we have vacant storefronts as well, and it's just, finding that right business for that location. But once they come to town hall, I feel like we try and fit them in, or we have a doggy daycare that was looking to possibly have to relocate because they were having some questions with their landlord. Luckily, they were able to work it out and expand, but Mike and I were ready to meet with her and find a new location for her. But it is challenging, I think, just getting the business to the town. Once they're in our town, we can help them find space or stay in town. But like Clinton, we do have, a large, the old IGA location right off of Route 80 and 139, where, we're looking for a tenant, but it's hard to actively do that when there's a lot of other things happening in town.
Can you tell us what is your economic development budget?
It was about 15,000. That's about it. Yeah, it's a struggle just to get that funded. They were on a shoestring before it's actually, we put more in. We actually put money in the budget for a part-time economic development coordinator / grant writer. That's been on hold because of the budget. So we're probably not, at this point, we're not going to fill that position until the state revenue situation is resolved. But it's pretty much a bare bones budget.
As with anything, there are pros and cons to both sides. You've talked about the pros of a town manager. What have you run into as a disadvantage or a con to a town manager?
Well, I think probably the biggest thing is the accountability, that you're not accountable to the elector, the citizens at large, right? So I answer to the council. So I know people have some difficulty with that, and they also have some difficulty with the fact that I'm not a resident. And that is the negatives that I can think of at this point. Otherwise, I think we handled the day-to-day operations pretty well, but those are two of the most prominent negatives.
Could you quickly go through your Board of Finance situation and how budgets are developed and if they go to referendum?
Yeah, excellent question. Sure. We do not have a Board of Finance. The Town Council serves that role. So I develop a budget and prepare a budget that I recommend to the council. And it goes from there through a process in which we have public hearings, we have meetings, we have workshops, then we put it together, and it goes from recommended from the town manager to the council, which is then after the hearings and meetings is a proposed, and then we set it to a referendum in May, and it goes to referendum in May, and then after that, it's if it passes, it's adopted. Our charter has a unique feature with respect to the referendum, where we require, in order for a budget to pass, it has to have 15% of the electorate or higher. Otherwise, it goes through, and we have not hit that. I'm not sure if they've ever hit that, but I think they had back in the late 80s or early 90s. Not since I've been there. So it's one of those unusual, I think, clauses that they have built into the charter with respect to the budget referendum. And our charter is online if anybody wants to look at it.
Just clarification on the last, you need 50% to reject?
15.
Oh, 15, okay.
Yeah.
That's, we have a proposal here where we have the Board of Finance being eliminated, we have a 5-member board of selectmen, and you have a 9-member council. Obviously, there's a lot of work and committees that go into the budget process. I think that's a bit difficult here if you eliminate the Board of Finance, which is one of the proposals, and just have a 5-member board with the manager. One thing I want to say about a manager that I've come to, I understand the accountability, and I really like the idea of accountability. But I think what happens to us is we lose opportunities because the people who could serve, leave a job for a 2-year job that they have to campaign and run for every 2 years, eliminates a lot of people from coming forward to serve in those positions. We're limited to people who need a job and people like myself who don't have to worry about a job because you're retired. So I think you really limit your opportunity for the leadership in the community with these kinds of jobs by not having a town manager. The only thing that I have a bit of a problem with here is credentials and what you're talking about, the qualifications set forth, whether it be residency, no residency, what degrees you have to be carrying in order to get the job. Those are all something that's not necessarily, if we vote for a manager, that stuff isn't clear. And there seems to be a lot, for my purpose, I think there's a lot of confusion here in Clinton. In fact, we just had a job description written this morning, and it may be that, the building official has probably more requirements than what our town manager might have. I'm not sure of that, but I think if I go back and check it just happened this morning, I'm probably correct. So I think that, talking about at will and everything else, but once you hire somebody, obviously, it's a little more difficult to hire, even at will, when you fire somebody, you gotta have some cause. But just your view on how many members, if you did move a town manager, how many members of the Board of Selectmen do you think would be needed to kind of compensate, because right now we have a 6-member Board of Finance with a 5-member Board of Selectmen. Both work in the process separately, but I think there's a lot of work that's done by both of those bodies that, if left to just the Board of Selectmen, might be difficult.
Yeah, good question. It's a great subject area with respect to Board of Finance, and I will maybe start by giving you a perspective back in where I started my career in Wyndham. There was the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance, so we had that separation, and I think what happens, there's a disconnect in terms of the policy setting board with the financial board. So again, it pits the politics against one another. In fact, I would battle for, in fact, what happened to me, I left the position of the executive administrator to take on the role of selectman, and I had to learn to be a politician. I was an administrator and learned to be a politician and got elected, figured it out. And the first thing that happened was for me to submit a replacement to finding a replacement for the position of executive administrator in the position I just vacated, presented to the Board of Finance. The Board of Finance said, no, you know what? We think you're going to be fine on your own. And, it's like, this is, it's not, I think, clearly understanding, the workload and what's involved. So, there's a lot of back and forth about the council at the time would set a budget and then, they want to, it's really trying, it's a really, how am I trying to say this is, you can affect policy a great deal by having a finance board make decisions that are contrary to what the council is. I think it works better when it's concentrated in one body. You have the fiscal and policy-making people at the table. There's no disconnect. They know which direction they want to go, and they know how to accomplish that. I bounced back in Wyndham from meeting to meeting, different nights. They weren't in the same room. It was like, I got to say, it's like the town and boards of education. Sometimes the two just don't meet. They don't see eye to eye. It's like two different kingdoms. It's a battle. So I happen to think, having worked in both sides, I think concentrated in one body works best. And there's also a question as to what is the right amount. I think, 9 in North Branford, 7 probably work just as effectively. 9 becomes a little unwieldy, I guess. 11 certainly, would be way too big, but 9's worked. It's worked for them since '71. So there's a question about that. But I hope that answers some of your questions anyway.
How frequently does the council meet? Our Board of Selectmen meets weekly now, but if you've got a council, do they meet weekly or less frequently? And I have a follow-up question.
Okay, sure. The council meets twice a month, the first and third Tuesday of the month, and except for the summer, July and August, where they go into what they call the summer mode, and they meet once in July and once in August. And also, actually, I should also say the election season, they won't have it on. They move in November to the second Tuesday, and they have one meeting there, ceremony with the new council voted in.
Yeah, a follow-up question. The threatened cuts from the state, how is North Branford, what's the magnitude of those cuts that are threatened to you, kind of as a percentage of your total budget, and what contingencies or what planning are you doing to try to adjust to that?
Yeah, it's a big cut for us. It's just under $8 million. And we budgeted for a reduction of almost 2.5. So we've got a $5.5 million gap, and we're looking at this point secondary or supplemental tax bill. But we're delaying that decision until November. That's probably the drop dead date for which we can logistically get the bills out. We had a meeting last night. We had our financial advisor and bond counsel in to explore the possibility of tax anticipation notes as a way of means to delay the pain and make up the revenue. But for a variety of reasons, that's probably not going to be an option for us, because typically it's going to result in a bond reduction a bond rating reduction typically. So we're looking at fund balance and the reserve fund balance and a tax bill. But we're delaying, hoping that there's going to be a solution in the next 5 or 6 weeks. I don't really hold out too much hope for that.
Yeah, I have a question for you, sir, the town manager. What compensation, if any, do the members of this council receive? And if they do, what would the deputy mayor and mayor get?
No compensation.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
In Clinton, when we vote on the Board of Education budget separately from the town budget. How do you work as town manager? Do you oversee the Board of Education also?
No,
Or is that separate?
no, that's separate. They come in and make a presentation to the council. We do it together in the public hearing, and they present. Well, they come before us in terms of a series of workshops to make a presentation to the council first, and then we do it again in terms of our public hearing. And they are basically are getting a bottom line number from the council, just about $30 million that is packaged into our total number. So we send out our combined budget and a number that we approve by the council and then send it to referendum.
Any other questions?
With all of the other commissions, such as the Public Works or police or what have you, how are you structured in terms of reporting? Who reports to whom from those various commissions?
Well, there's commissions, and then there are departments, and we have a voluntary fire department with 3 companies and an ambulance corps. There's a fire commission, and they hire the fire chief. The fire chief answers to the fire commission. On the other side, for police, same way, there's a police commission. They hire the chief, and the chief answers to the police commission. Those two members do not answer to me. Public Works and everybody else, tax collector, assessor, engineer, finance, everybody else answers to me.
Who negotiates the contracts with police and fire?
Well, interestingly enough, no contract with fire, but on the police side, I do. The chief is part of that consultation, but I do, and we have 4 bargaining units. We have town hall, clerical, we have public works, and we have a library and police, and I negotiate all of those.
Sorry, my question is for the town planner. How much time do you spend outside of actually being in the town of Branford and operating just on issues going on within the town of Branford? How much outreach do you do?
Do you mean like for professional development or for economic development reasons? Not much. I really, I work with the Economic Development Commission, but it's really within the town, you know, so it's trying to promote the existing businesses that are there and help enhance them. And then once people come to town looking for space, I help them, but I don't have the time to do a lot of outreach to try and recruit businesses to town. As Mike mentioned, there is a position, a part-time position that was approved by town council for a part-time economic development coordinator, although that's been put on hold because of the budget situation. So I think that person would do more of that outreach, but I don't do much of that.
Hi, Carey. Would you say that your position is similar to like a project manager? So if we have objectives in the town plan, it would be your responsibility to foresee that they come to fruition?
Yes, I think as far as the plan of conservation and development, absolutely. But because I staff the planning and zoning commission as well, I'd say that takes up about 60% of my time. And then maybe, 40%, again, depends on how many applications we have before the commission. But the other portion of my time, say 40% would be, project management of trying to do something like the brochure, or if you see I guess you could say the text amendments that I've been working on with the Planning and Zoning Commission, or like that local farmer that I mentioned, that's kind of like project management, in that I work with an applicant to get them through the process and trying to just explain what the expectations are, what the requirements are from the statute, and then getting them before the Planning and Zoning Commission.
So right now we have projects that are housed by volunteers that are trying to get through plans that are part of the town plan but have stalled and have gone nowhere because of politics, because of whatever. But it is in the plan. So it would be taking place of, well, volunteers may participate, but you would essentially be that project manager.
Right, so another example is the local land trust has been trying to update their, just a map even, just a plan showing where the open space is located in town, who owns it, and they've been doing it by hand. But because we have a contract with, a consultant, and we're looking to update the plan of conservation and development, I'm able to work with them to get that project done a lot faster than they would be able to with just volunteer hands and volunteer efforts.
Carey, this is for you. It's just going back to a previous statement you said where you were asked about the outreach. And you said that you don't get to do a lot of that. Is that typical of a town planner? Isn't kind of a town planner's role to do more outreach than that? Or is it unique to North Branford?
Well, I think it's maybe a little unique. So looking at North Branford, again, I am very fortunate to have a part-time zoning officer, but if you look at some other towns like along the shoreline, like Madison, Branford, Guilford, each of those towns have a full-time planner, full-time zoning officer, full-time wetlands person. So, those are different towns, obviously, than North Branford, different size, different population, different square mileage, area, all of that stuff. But I have limited time, so I think because of that, because I'm doing wetlands and I'm staffing the Planning and Zoning Commission, I can't do that outreach. So it is a little unique. I think in the larger municipalities where they have more staffing, the town planner is able to do a little bit more outreach and work directly with the Economic Development Commission.
We have time for one more.
What is a question for the planner? We have, it calls a charter mandating, a plan. You were part-time, so I don't know what the charter says in North Branford. Does it say may, or does it not say anything? You just hire a town planner, or you shall be a planner by the charter?
believe that it's by charter, and it's, as far as I know, the research that I've done, it's always been a full-time position.
But you were part-time.
I was full-time, but part-time zoning officer.
So you can be full-time, part-time planner. Because it's, you know, the charter says if you hire a full-time planner, you can't be part-time zoning officer, zoning enforcement officer.
Right.
But,
I think it was in addition to.
okay. The final question I have, and I recognize that ground rules were laid about certain things. I hope before the third session is over, we have a chance to discuss process rather than merit. No, I know that. I'm just saying before it's over, because I respected the rules, because I really came here for another reason. So I respected the rules. And I'm just saying before it's over, and on the third meeting, you know, when I get the bike, it's hard to get away from me sometimes. So I hope we have a process.
Hey, I need shoes and a mic. One more, we have one more, perky one, okay. I want to thank you all for coming tonight. We're so grateful, Mike, Carey. This was as informative, and the depth and the breadth of the information you shared has been so important to us in Clinton. I thank you so much. And do you have to drive back to Willimantic tonight? Oh my goodness, this is a true service. We appreciate you so much.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having us.